So we have the last speaker for the session, who will be presenting on Akshar-Chittra, can type made from a craft transform the process of learning to read and write. It will be presented by Ishan Khosla. He is the trustee and founder of the Typecraft Initiative, UPES, Dehradun. So may I request Mr. Ishan Khosla to kindly present.
Hi. Great. Thank you, Uday Kumar, and thank you, Typo Day, IDC Mumbai, again for having me. I've been here before, and I'm very honored to be selected again, my paper. So the theme of my paper is typography in the process of learning to write and read. And actually, I've changed the title. It's now called Akshar-Chittra, and I'm actually going to talk about transforming. It's the same talk, but it's just the title is slightly changed. So it's about transforming primary education in Hindi through folk art and type. And as they mentioned, I'm Ishan Khosla, Associate Professor, School of Design, UPS Dehradun. And I'm also partner of the Typecraft Initiative. Before I start, I must thank everyone involved, because this is a highly collaborative project. So firstly, I'm going to thank Loka International School, which is a rural school based in Bihar. And also the students, the children there, the teachers, the staff, because they were all very helpful. I had spent about 10 days on doing field research there during COVID times, very difficult time for them as well. And then, of course, I'm very grateful to all the Madhubani artists. So we work with Mithila artists like Rekha and Hirakant, and then Shanti Devi on the left, Pradyumna Kumar, and also from our team, the Typecraft Initiative team, we have Shirley Bhatnagar and Ashima Kaushik, who really worked very hard on this project. So I'd really like to thank all of them. And the process was difficult because this happened during COVID, various phases. This is a project that's been taken more than 2 years. It's still ongoing. We've done quite a bit, but I'll just continue and talk about it now. But just to introduce you to a little bit, I do want to connect this to the evolution of a child's brain. The studies do show that the child's brain and the larynx, descending of the larynx, right? So then initially the child doesn't have a vocal cords as nuanced as an adult or an older child, which mimics the evolution of hominids to Homo sapiens, right? So initially we communicated through animistic sounds, just sounds, very raw sounds and gestures. And then, of course, through paintings that you see in cave, all over the cave paintings, ancient cave paintings like Lakau and other places that have been discovered. Followed by pictograms and proto-language, like you have hieroglyphs and you have a cuneiform. Both in hieroglyphics, actually objects and sound started being represented for the first time. And then from hieroglyphs, we of course get the alphabet we all know, which eventually became rebus-based. And so sound was important in the alphabet. From there, we went to more compact way of representing information and communication through the use of ideograms, such as this male-female toilet, and of course our omnipresent smiley faces, emojis, etc., etc. So then I question whether our next step in evolution will be typography, which has images embedded in it, which creates another layer of communication. So it's proven that seeing comes before words. It's always about the visual. The human visual cortex is as evolved as a dog's hearing and smell sense, which is extremely evolved. So makes sense that that sight is an extremely important sense for us humans, and education has been using that. But I feel the power of typography, graphic design, and folk art to transform primary education has not even been the surface has not even been scratched in that, at least in India, I would say. And so in terms of visual learning, it makes sense that since visuals do play an important role in a child's development and the ability to communicate, the central premise in this paper is that by embedding images in text would not only make instruction more interactive, engaging, and immersive, but it's also going to be more enduring. That means the child would remember it much longer. than if only text was being used. So we do have education where images and text are already being used, as we know, but they're used side by side. They're not together, right? They're not, you have text and your image separately. But the problem here is that the shape of the object, the sound of the object, and the shape of the letter are all disconnected, which makes it a little confusing for the child, right? So you have three things to deal with. You have "d" and you have "d" looks like a river or like a S in Latin script, you can say, but it's Damru, right? And so on and so forth. Which Damru looks like something else, and then how do you connect that sound and to the visual feeling, right? And that's kind of the crux, I would say, the problem statement that I'm going to be talking about now in the next few minutes. And so Akshar-Chittra actually uses images which are embedded inside the Devanagari script. So Hindi letters basically made in the Madhubani or Mithila style of Hindi speaking Bihar. So the idea was to use obviously a language spoken by the people we work with. So for instance, this can be done in Tamil Nadu in the future with Kolam in Tamil, or in Varli and in Marathi, of course, also Devanagari script, and so on and so forth. So it can be carried forward further in other scripts as we go on. But of course, this is, I mean, a highly challenging project, as we've seen in some of the previous ones as well, because I think this is one of the few times that we have, at least for us, is the first time that we worked with a, indigenous craft tradition and try to make letter forms which have images embedded in it and which make sense to a child as well, right? So, and that's where the complexity of the project comes, and I will talk about this in the coming slides, the challenges, etc. So these are certain papers that I've referenced to, which also talk about, using images along with text to improve recall. And basically to improve recall, if you use images and text together, which of course have been used, but what if you embed them in the text itself? What does that do? So this is Jho se Jhopadi, for instance, and you've already seen Ghar se Ghadi and some of the other ones. U se Ulu, La se Leher, Pe se Ped, and so on and so forth, right? So basically the idea is that this is going to be a toolkit and an engaging and enduring type of learning. So I'll talk more about the outcomes later, but I just want to talk about the various challenges we faced. Some of them were functional, including making the letters intelligible for young minds who are still learning the alphabet. I mean, that's the primary audience. Of course, we found out later that there can be secondary and tertiary audiences, obviously, but that came out later in our study. But our primary goal is to bring this into kindergarten in schools across India if possible. And the other, of course, challenge is that children in urban and rural areas have a very different understanding of the level of Hindi is obviously very different in a rural setting in the heartland versus an urban, especially private school setting. And then, of course, there are other more challenges in terms of the structure of how you construct these letters. And I'll just talk about some of them in the brief time I have. So, of course, sometimes using repeated elements, as you see in the left, O for Oakley, doesn't really work. It feels a little forced, like in these couple of examples. Some of the, craftswomen and men tried these various interesting forms, like making a dulan in the form of a da. And it's an interesting idea, but it becomes a little forced. So, so there's a lot of back and forth and decision making and what would work and not to make it too forced, but actually to make it interesting, still keep it playful and relevant and obviously legible. On the right, what you see are examples where, repetition can work, like in a mango tree, an aam, A se aam, obviously mangoes are repeating in the tree, so that could work. This is khilone, ki se khilone, so multiple toys are shown, chinti, etc., right? So that's why repeated elements can be problematic if not contextual. The other thing is that some words are difficult to make, out of images, or they're too similar to others. So like on the left, you have Thar se Thatera. It's fairly complicated. So in Thar se Thatera, we actually did a Tho se Thokna. I'll see if I have that slide later. But on the right, some of the artists, they tried Ba se Baas and E se Eek. But they both, so sugarcane and bamboo, but they look very similar, to a child or even to an adult. It can be very confusing because the plant is not that differently depicted. And then even words like bhutta, like bhu, the challenge was like, okay, how do you get the u ki matra, And so we had to improvise and use the skin of the corn itself, or in Bunai, something Ashima actually worked on is where the thread comes down from Ba and becomes a choti U, and so on and so forth. But of course, the main learning we also did was through user testing. That means actually going to the children, to the schools, and actually trying it out and getting their inputs as well. And what was some of the surprising aspects were that we noticed that even older students were very interested in this project. And I'll talk about that in the coming slides. But first, we got some critical feedback from teachers and Hindi language experts. Like this is in Loka school in Bihar, again, in rural Bihar. The teachers gave us really insightful ideas and thoughts on how to improve this. Of course, they were also very ecstatic to see this, which was nice to hear. But for instance, we asked them questions like, should it be machi or should it be immersive mobile, right? Like, should we use contemporary words or should we use more traditional words that you see already in the Varnwala charts that we are aware of? And actually, the answers were very interesting. They said that at least in Bihar, machi makes sense. And they said that this is then a starting point because they have so many types of fish. They would use this as a starting point in a class exercise and ask the child to draw other fish, in other letters. So because there are many other types of local fish with different names. And they felt that, of course, mobile can be added later, but they felt it was easier to relate to a fish. Mobile could be more complicated in their situation, but maybe in an urban situation, we don't know. We may have to use something else. The thing is that to take away from this is that it's not a static tool. These are starting points. These are kind of provocations, right, in the classroom to just get started, get the teacher excited, get the student excited, and to do more exercises, right? So that's the really the big idea here. I mean, here I'm just showing Sneha, who's one of the primary school teachers at Loka. Again, she's talking like she and Sanat, who one of the founders, also gave us very interesting feedback, like this nurse and null doesn't have drops coming out, so it doesn't quite look like a tap. So these are very detailed and small feedbacks, but they really make a difference. In the top of the tap is not very clear. It's very stylized, and that was one of the challenges working with the folk art tradition, is because they do like to make certain designs and styles, which you don't want to take away that as well. So we're dealing with like multiple aspects, legibility, intelligibility, as well as the folk art tradition. So there are multiple dynamics going on here. And just a few more things to talk about is that, some of the challenges we faced was that, for instance, in terms of, say, Bandar, there are many, aspects going on. There's a tree, and he's kind of leaning from the tree, and then there's the tail, and then there's an object inside the tail, a banana, I guess. So it becomes maybe a little too complex to understand, but it was a very interesting idea. Se Garud or Gulab wasn't quite working because multiple elements are being used in one letter, or multiple words. So it becomes complicated. And then Bha Se Bhagwan was also one of those which were a little too vague or abstract to understand. Similarly, A, say, Anak, and antenna was incorporated, which we eventually got rid of based on our feedback at Loka School, or even first say Phal, because it has birds in it pecking the fruit, which is beautiful in terms of Madhubani art style, but it doesn't quite work. So yeah, that was the conclusion, that multiple elements, or even if they're related, don't really work and tell the story. So we have to keep it very simple. What was some of the other learnings is that it was very amazing to see is that students up to class 5 got really excited by this project. I mean, we were targeting kindergarten kids, but we realized that even more senior students wanted to design their own letter. So her name, this is Madhu. So with Ma, we gave the challenge that can you do something with Ma? So she's done Machi and a Madhumaki, and so even other students have done like Punk and Kela, and so it was very interesting to see this sort of learning, and it's almost like bringing art and design education through typography and folk art into the classroom. And of course, this is not something unprecedented. I mean, there are examples of embedding images into type that go to the medieval times and illuminated manuscripts. This is the medieval manuscript on the left from France. And then in the middle, there's a famous book called The Scarecrow Fairy Tale, by Kurt Schwitters and Theo van Doesburg, the proponents of the Dada movement and the D-Style movement. So they came together and actually made this really amazing children's book. Exactly, I think it's about 100 years old. It was, I think, done in 1922 or 23. And then more recent Zwan letters by Makoto Kagoshima, which incorporates images inside letters relating to, obviously, the, A for alligator, relating to the letter itself. But it has many, many other elements inside it as well. And of course, in the Indic script, we also found some examples. We haven't seen any with folk artists per se or for primary education, but some really beautiful examples like you see by these designers. Now I'd like to conclude with a few remaining slides. So the idea here is not just to create pride in one's own culture, but to give children and, more importantly, educators teaching tools that are relevant, easy to understand, and flexible enough to be able to be used in a range of classroom situations. The key is to localize sources of inspiration and learning to not only create pride in the community, but also to basically prevent people from just looking at the West or urban areas for inspiration, but looking at the village or the local for their sources of inspiration. There's been too much influence of Western education and thought and Disneyfication, I call it, in Indian education, even in, I would say, even in the vernacular languages and scripts when it comes to educational tools and books that you see. So we need to kind of move beyond that. And there are so many amazing avenues. I mean, already a lot of designers are doing this. But I feel that in mainstream graphic design and pedagogy, whether at the primary, secondary, or tertiary level of education, is fairly lacking in terms of looking at our own culture more deeply and coming up with certain solutions and bringing it into primary education. But of course, forums like this to create a discourse on what constitutes Indian design, or what constitutes, what is the role of typography in a country as diverse as India, typographically and linguistically. And importantly, of course, this is an opportunity for both craft and design to benefit from each other. Design can make a real difference to craft communities through the introduction of different tools and resources to re-examine these crafts. At the same time, craft can humanize communication design, which tends to be driven by the computer and technology, and enrich it by embedding cultural symbolism and meaning. So we've thought about the outcome of the project as a book, and a book could be used by teachers as well as students. It needs to be approachable to students, but it should also be something that a teacher could use. But we thought there could be perforations, and you could rip them off. Maybe there are multiple prints of the same letter, so multiple copies could be ripped off, I don't know, or easily photocopied. So we are thinking a lot from a rural perspective, keeping them black and white, so you could color them in, or you can photocopy them very easily, because there are black and white photocopier machines available in schools or near schools in rural areas especially. So we want this to be very mass rather than kind of luxury and high end. We wanted to actually make an impact. Of course, it can be used in various ways. This could be a chart that can be put up in the classroom as well. And this is just idea is that these are just starting points, or as I said, provocations. These are just some list of references. Of course, too much to go through right now, but if you would like to know more, my paper is probably uploaded on the on the Typo Day website. Thank you very much for your time. I'd like to end it here. Okay.
Thank you. Professor Ishan. Yeah, so brilliant work, and a very interesting blend of art, craft, and typography. So nice to see such a wonderful work. Thank you. And also, hopefully, we are almost there. I think the session is to be end at 7:30, but I hope we'll have a couple of more minutes to have a question answer session to all three of you. So may I quickly request the participants to ask their question. Maybe you can name the speaker. We have three of them: Professor Huang, and then Vaijayanti, and also Professor Ishan. All three of them are there. So yeah, please raise your hands, and you can just pose your questions to any of the three speakers if you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question to Professor Huang. Can children make use of your solution? It seems to be really nice, because you're going from 2D to 3D to virtually, all the three dimensions. The explorations are really very interesting. So I was just thinking, if is your audience, are they, you talked about the elderly, but can they be children?
Yeah, thank you, Ravi.
Yeah.
And at this moment, we have encountered just only few university students. Most of them is the student in my university, and then I asked them, informally to play with it, and then afterward we kind of gather their comments, but not yet official like the elderly people examination, because for the elderly people, and then we have a funding, and a really small amount funding allow us to have a chance to encounter some elderly center. And afterward, we have been conducting almost 4 weeks and then 2 sessions per week, kinds of user testing section. Yeah, and then we would like to continue these kinds of formally testing for the teenager, but at this moment not yet start. Yeah, and then I'm waiting for some funding allow us to have these kinds of the testing. But at this moment, we have already collect some comment from the university grade student, because they are more easy to encounter, and then most of them is in my class. So we only have the university comment, not yet really transform our work to the teenager. We hope we can bring some good news for you all next year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ravi.
So is there any, I see Devan Das. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, hello, good evening. First of all, thank you so much for sharing all your work. And I have a question for Professor Kuhn. Namaste, Professor. So and another second question may be addressed to all three of the speakers. So first of all, Dr. Kuhn, this may seem a bit of a naive question, but I'm coming from the fact that if, when we're teaching design research, and just to understand from a different cultural perspective. So the question is, what is your intention when you start a design process? And the second question I'll just wind up to all three of you is, what limitations do you face? Would you consider this as design research? What, including Professor Vaijayanti, would you consider what you do as design research as well?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So maybe thank you for this question, and I would like to share with you about the intention. And then the first step, actually, I'm a Tai Chi practitioner. So I've been playing Tai Chi for almost 20 years. So I really encounter and witness some of my classmates of some of the similar level practitioner. Sometimes they find lots of difficulties, and then also they find once they find difficulty, and then they just give up. They just disappear in the class. Yeah, and so I think, okay, then this is one of my research question, and I would like to solve. So once I've done some kinds of observation, and then some of my questionnaire, then I understand, I discover some design question, a design problem I need to solve. First of all, they feel have no confidence when they play alone, because the Tai Chi style is really complicated, and then they need to memorize a lot of complicated steps. So this is one of the design problem I encounter, and then I want to use the whole design practice to solve it. So I try to understand why they think it's complicated, and then afterward I create the combined Chinese characters. Yeah, so allow them to have a more easy experience to memorize the complicated process. So first of all, define the problem, and then afterward try to solve the problem. And then afterward, then there's one problem not yet been solved, is this kinds of exercise is regarded as outdated and belonged to the elderly people. And then no teenagers, and then they feel interest, because they always say playing Tai Chi is really abstract, and then they have no way to really encounter. So this is also the design problem. And then if you want to keep it like a sustainable heritage, and then you need to invite more newcomer. So we think how to invite more newcomer. So we need to share similar kinds of visual language. They are playing apps, they are using computer, they are using mobile phone, they are using iPad. Or maybe we can transform the Chinese characters, that means Tai Chi, from the 2D plane surface, first of all, to the animation. Then afterward, maybe to the AR technology. I'm not expect the teenager will be professional Tai Chi player. This is not my expectation. But I expect this is a good start to drive their interest. Once we drive their interest, maybe we success 50% already. So this is my kinds of hierarchy. That means my thinking process here. I hope I can explain things clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe the second question to all the other two people who have, we can add to it.
Yes, so about research and referencing, I would say I am constantly evolving when it comes to references. Like 1 year, I was excessively gaining insights from architecture. Then the next year, it would be cinema or music or some dance form, and some reading about psychology. And all of this, I think, contributes to my creative process.
Yeah. Professor Ishan, do you have anything to say?
Yes, thank you. And thanks for the question, Devan. I think it's a good question. I mean, it's complicated. Different projects call for different types of thinking and work. I mean, for instance, we work a lot with tribal communities and folk art communities. So a lot of it is also being anthropological, having an ethnographic sensibility, but also being sensitive to that community and not being colonizers yourself. A lot of time designers, we tend to go to villages and think that we are teaching people. So humility is also important. So yeah, it's all part of it, right? It's also research, design thinking, and how do you collaborate with people of different, from various walks of life, different, they live in villages, they do tattoos, they have various different rituals that we don't, even know of. And that also as a communication designer really adds to your kind of, I guess, suite of expertise or things that you can be better at. And I think it's always a learning experience ultimately. But so there are many aspects to the research, I would say. It's not just about ethnographic or field research, but there are many, 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 depending on the project. But thank you. It's a good question.
Thank you. Thank you for the answers. So we'll just take one last question by Nitin Daga. Yes, Nitin, be quick.
Yeah, sure. My question is for Vajanti ma'am. Ma'am, I wanted to know, like, how do we add matras and stuff in such complicated letter forms like yours? There are so many details in that, and then there's color and stuff.
I had actually designed like a standard matra, Kana Matra Velanti, and it kind of sticks to the main letter. So, when I can't just stick it like that, like I have to sort of, I don't know how to say this, but can I share screens for a minute? So I kind of have to, customize the Kana Matra. Like you see over here for the Shay, like it sticks, like I have to work individually on these.
So there's no automation like
no.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope
because I was thinking about the commercial use. So if you take this digitally.
Yeah.
But I love your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Nitin.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you all. And so we come to the end of the session. So I would like to thank all the speakers for sharing such a wonderful work and very creative work. So thank you all. And I'm sure that all the participants would have enjoyed listening to you. And keep up the good work and wish you all the best. And thank you. Yeah, with this, I'll hand over to Nirja to further conclude it and move on to the next section. So thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thanks to all the panel members for such wonderful presentations and to Professor Udayakumar for chairing this session.